it is good that we're hearing basically kind of the same Gospels on Sunday and now during our weekday Masses. Because as you know, just hearing something once, it doesn't take root in our hearts, in our minds. It's like the seed that falls on the path that, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't, put roots. And we heard these two parables not too long ago, and again, they remind us about the kingdom of heaven. But how can we see that in real life, in real, situations? Well, like the mustard seed that starts obviously very small, but then grows to be a big bush. Today, as I mentioned, we celebrate the memorial of St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits community. He started by himself, and then later a few men came and joined him. Within 15 years, there were 1,000 Jesuits in the order. Hundreds of years later, the Jesuit community is still continuing his work, proclaiming the good news. It started with one person, then few other men, and look at the community now. So these are not just empty words, but real words. It's truth, the truth of the gospel, how the power of God works with the lowly. The parable of this yeast, obviously when you mix the yeast with the dough, then you don't see the yeast anymore. And the dough sits, it needs time to begin to rise, and sometimes it looks like nothing is happening. The same thing from our first reading. When Moses went up the mountain and took a long time there, the people thought, well, God has abandoned them, or Moses has abandoned them. So they turned to other gods instead of being patient and trust that God will never abandon them. They couldn't see the yeast, they couldn't see Moses, and they thought, well, nothing is happening. A lot of times in our own lives, we don't see God's presence. We wonder, where is God? But God is like the yeast doing his work, although it doesn't appear to us externally. We look at the world, obviously we always hear the bad news about the church, but God is still working. The kingdom of heaven is still being built, and we need to have patience and remain faithful like Moses, like our Blessed Mother, and many of the saints before us. So these parables are not just like words, but that's how God works in this world, how God works in building his kingdom.